Well, first of all, I want to say I was very honored when Holly asked me to. Oh, okay, great, thank you. Great. When Holly asked me to be one of the founding members who spoke today, because there are so many people here who have been committed to this church for the last 15 years, and I was very honored. I don't know if I'm deserving of the honor, but would just like to sort of tell my story, because my story really starts not with this church, but with an old church. And I think it's important to understand what happened in our old church for the people who started this church, because it was very formative, and it really focused on what was the community that we wanted to build. So if I go back to my story, which started 24, 25, almost 25 years ago, my sons were very little. They were toddlers. And I was looking for a church for my family. I had been raised in the Catholic tradition, and that had not matched my spiritual sense for many, many years. So I went to some different churches. You know, my husband at the time stayed home with our kids, and I went to the Methodist church, and I was like, I don't think so. And I went to the Presbyterian church, and I was like, wow, these people do communion really weird. And then and I went to the Unitarian church, and I brought my kids to that one, and it was funny. They were talking about a goddess, and Johnny said in front of the whole congregation in the loudest whisper he could possibly say, Mommy, I didn't know God was a grill. So, which is fine. He understands and understood then that God is genderless, but it was just a little too far of a leap from my faith tradition. And so someone told me about this beautiful church in Olathe that looked like a mission from, South America. And I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And it was actually a connection with Suzanne Gladney, who we have been involved with for many, 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 many years as part of the Migrant Farm Worker Project. So I went, again, leaving the children at home. I went to test out this new church, and I sat there in this beautiful building listening to the most beautiful sermon I had ever heard. I went to the parking lot, and I broke down in tears. Oh, I'm going to do it again. In my car, because I had found such a sense of relief. For many, many years, I had really felt like religion was trying to take God away from me. And every time I tried to get into an organized religion, I felt like it was putting more and more barriers between me and God. And I found in St. Andrew a church, and in Holly as a pastor, a church that was bringing me closer to God. And I was so relieved. So joined the church, and I was more of a passive member. I was a working mom, very busy, raising 2 kids, so was not terribly involved in the church. But it was growing. A lot of other people were finding that this church met their needs. And so there was a 4th service, that was being planned. There was a new building that was going to be constructed. Holly was getting national recognition in addition to being like a contributor for the Kansas City Star Religious Voices. She was asked to give the opening prayer at the 2011 General Assembly of the Disciples of Christ. There was this church back east who was actively recruiting her. And then, as everything was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, Holly took a much-needed vacation. And what happened can only be described to me like a coup. It really felt like a coup. And what happened was a few people, and we're seeing that it only takes a few people to tear something down. We're seeing this in our country, actually. And this felt to me like maybe this handful of people thought Holly might be getting, a little too big for her britches. And I wondered to myself, would this happen if she were a male preacher? Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have, but that's a little bit what it felt like to her. And so during this time of turmoil, I became one of her very vocal advocates. And there were a lot of us who felt like this was really a terrible time of betrayal, not just for Holly, but for all of us, right? And many of us left that church because of it. And I can only describe it as a betrayal and as a trauma. We really felt incredibly traumatized. So, as we all know, sometimes we are broken apart so that God can help us build something better, right? And this was also at a time of betrayal in my personal life. I had just gone through a very painful divorce, right? Right now, we are kind of in a time of what feels to some of us like a betrayal of our country, right? And I've always had the idea that maybe after these really terrible times, something better can come from it. So, as Holly said, I think it was Allie, there we go. sort of like Brangelina, right? So Ellie and Alex reached out to Holly, and they started to talk about worshiping again together on Sundays. And the word got out, right? So in those early days, sometimes we were at the Rime Buddhist Center. Sometimes we were at this little church across from Blue Valley North High School. It felt a little nomadic. I kept telling myself, well, maybe this was kind of like the early Christians, you know? But we were emerging, and we were really growing from the collective trauma. And as we got more settled, a group of us started to work on the bylaws, okay? And as a lawyer, I can tell you that you can easily pull sample bylaws from the internet, but when you don't have good governing laws, like we did not have at St. Andrew, you are very careful to make sure that you correct those problems in the future. So a lot of work went into the Peace Christian bylaws, and I remember those early days. I mean, we're talking months and months and months and hours and hours and hours, and several of the people sitting here were involved in those. But it really took months of crafting this. And I was kind of focused on the conflict resolution piece. And there was something in the church bulletin that we haven't seen for a while since we went to this smaller version. But for more than 10 years, there was this little member covenant in the bulletin. And I'd like to go ahead and read it now. It was something that I worked on, Holly, too, and it basically states, as church members, we will treat one another with courtesy, encouragement, tolerance, and compassion. We will not speak ungraciously of other members, our pastors, other staff members, or our church. We will strive to bring about the best in ourselves and each other. At the same time, we expect our diverse church to include differing viewpoints. We will seek to create an atmosphere of trust and confidence to encourage ideas and discussion. If our different views result in conflict, we will strive to manage conflict constructively in accordance with the Healthy Church Conflict Resolution Guidelines. And those guidelines really talk about open communication, active listening, and constructive change. So for me, personally, Peace Church was a turning point, right? I went from being a somewhat passive member to at that time, a very active member. And I'm still on the Pastoral Care Committee. It's a group. Mary Zimmerman, Diana Stewart, and I meet with Holly from time to time. And I have to say, we haven't done this in a while because it's really sort of when she's in crisis. Not in crisis, but, you know, when she wants to bounce some ideas around. And things have been going so smoothly that we haven't really met that as much as we needed to. And I'm also on the devotional writing list. So I think the change for me personally, from being a rather passive member to a more active member, helped me to really grow more spiritually and anchored me more deeply here. So what we have at Peace, I think, is something really special. And I don't want to take it for granted and think that it will go on into perpetuity with no effort, right? And as some of you get older, as some of us get older, these founding members get older. We don't all have gray hair, but if you have gray hair, the chances are fairly strong that you were around as one of the family member. You know, some of the people who are newer members, it'd be great for you to come and take over, you know. I do know that when I was at St. Andrew, I kind of felt like the cogs were already spinning and that they didn't really need me and that I was fine. And it can be a little bit difficult to break into that. But we certainly want people to know if you have talents, if you would like to step up and have ideas, that we want to hear them, and we definitely want to become as inclusive as we possibly can. So we hope that Peace will always be an open, inclusive, and participatory congregation. We aren't focused on building funds and groundskeeping committees, but really about caring for each other, every single one of us. And I am very grateful to all of you and to so many here who put in that hard work early on, and to so many here who continue to put in that hard work, because for me, this is my spiritual home. And it would be so hard for me to find something that brings me actually a organized religion that brings me closer to God and doesn't, in fact, act as a barrier to that. So thank you, Holly. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Ellie and Alex, and everyone else. And thank you for asking me to speak. Okay.